Now, this afternoon is about doing food policy better into the future. How we should do food policy into the future with a particular focus on taking a more inclusive approach to integrated food policy, building on what we've learned this morning. And we're going to start with where reality is for a lot of people, with a performance by the People's Food Knowledge Collective, featuring Hull Solidarity and Nomad. And they're going to help us with the question, how can we learn to do food policy better through better understanding the lived experience of food? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lord Cranborne Gaythorne. I'm the Minister for Sustainable Consumption. So, the post-Brexit food landscape. It's a good news story, really. We're following evidence-based policy. We have the policies that will make Britain a net food exporter again. We're a growing economy, and as we know, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm glad to have my colleagues here from the Department for International Development, from Glaxo, Sunny Delight, Welcome, Magic Bullet Foundation, and I will be talking to you about the future as we go together in our post-Brexit world.
I want to tell you a story. I come from the southwestern mountains of Colombia. I come from a very humble family of peasant coffee farmers. I was approached by a coffee federation in Colombia and said to us, would you like to be fair trade? And we say, of course, what is fair trade? So they explained, and we thought it was great. So we started making our farm very agroecological. They said at the end of the year they will give us the bonus for our fair trade coffee. So at the end of the year I went to the co-op and asked, can I have my bonus, please? And they gave me a voucher to buy chemical fertilizers in their own shops.
As part of the red, white and blue Brexit, global economies are going to be our target, and we will be doing fair trade, we'll be doing maybe normal, you might call it unfair trade, and it mixes nicely in the ecosystem of trade.
And I'm Asha. I grew up in Somalia from a very well-educated family, very wealthy. We had amazing food there, amazing lifestyle, and then I came to Great Britain and it just seemed so much change. And then I was thinking, what is a food bank?
Food banks are thriving. We're thrilled to be in partnership with the Trust, No Trouble Trust, who are doing just fantastic work with these poor unfortunates, who, as the tide rises, their boats will come up.
Hello, my name is Howard, and today I have made the best fresh and organic food. I have made fish, maize, cassava, but my daughter, she wants to eat food from Iceland. You know, the frozen food, the chicken and chips. She is not appreciating my food.
We have a diverse food economy. 95% of things come from supermarkets, but people want to make choices and have these spicy foods. I suppose they can have them.
Your blood! I'm happy to be here. Guess what? My name is Linda. No, Sweetie from No Weezy. Dr. Mamami is going to be chilling. My name is Don't tell her. Food stinks. Me like my Iceland.
We are rolling out our new schools education policy, voluntary of course, to encourage good food choices among our diverse and thriving population in our red, white and blue Brexit education policy.
So I was so puzzled by this problem of the fair trade coffee that I called some people that I knew in the UK and I said to them, why don't you just support me to come over and tell my story? So they did. But it was quite a challenge, you know. I'm not going to tell you about home office because that's another story. But I go there and I end up in North Yorkshire. And I discovered a big organic farm.
I don't know what people are talking about, this problems with fair trade. We are in a global economy, and if you want to grow more stuff from the UK, well, they seem to be legal. I mean, you know, the guy's still walking around. He hasn't been carted off yet. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a perfectly reasonable way of having locally grown, post-Brexit, red, white and blue indigenous food.
And then after a couple of years of living in England, had 3 kids, amazing kids, and then all of a sudden, I got a divorce, my life changed, and I, the daughter of Ali Abu Bakr, had to go to council housing, no such thing where I'm from. And then all of a sudden, I was using a food bank, and I was like, food bank? You know, am I begging to get food? And then all this food, I don't even understand what it is, tins and cans. What was that all about? And I should appreciate that. I should be happy with tins and cans.
We've left the world of benefits behind and curtains staying shut at 11 o'clock in the morning. We're now in a thriving economy where if people work and you know, ambitious, have aspirations, they will do well in our country. And for those who, you know, have these problems, well, you know, there's enough wealth in society. The Good Samaritan had to have money to hand it out to the poor person on the other side of the road, and I think food banks are a good demonstration of that.
You see, the other day, me and my daughter, Chili, not Linda, we were sitting in the living room, we were watching a documentary on BBC, and they were talking about organic food, vegan food, fresh food, and it made me realize everything I'm trying to tell her, you know, the media is a confirmation, but when she listens to me, my knowledge is disrespected. But it takes the media to make it acceptable.
We live in an economy where there is advertising. It's a capitalist economy, in case you haven't noticed. Advertising helps people make choices, and we're not about to regulate advertisers. We have very good ways of not advertising to children. You know, if they stay up too late, it's obviously their parents' fault, and see adverts they shouldn't. But, you know, that we have a fantastic voluntary education policy that McDonald's and KFC have been running for some years, well, I think with some success as far as I can see. The people, certainly my cleaner's fairly thin.
You get me? My old lady, Dr. Hadda, yeah. She don't get it. She wants me, Linda from North Wheezy, to eat plantain. That's shit, bruv. I tell her, Mum, it's all about the KFC, it's all about the McD's. She don't get it. I ain't telling my friends to come to my yard. Stinks, innit? The food stinks. Plantain? Rubbish.
Well, I think some of my fellow members in the Commons canteen, some of them are of colour, but, you know, they eat proper food. They're happy to come to the club. Yes, I think we have a perfectly good diet for the people I mix with, and that seems to be a good cross-section of the population.
So I ended up in this Georgia farm of organic food. And I said to the woman that runs it, would you give me a job? I haven't got money and I need to get down to London. And then she said, of course we'll give you a job. So I went to work, and there were rows and rows and rows of vegetables growing organically in a very good manner, very ethically, of course. So they have all these workers from Poland, from Ukraine, and some from Colombia, and we were laying in our bellies all day, weeding the vegetables, and weeding the vegetables all day. And then I discovered something really peculiar. There were these young English children, like 14, 15, 16, who haven't been employed. And they were employed under the apprenticeship program. And they were being paid £3.50 to produce organic food for 30 supermarkets of the UK. Can you believe this?
Well, I'm afraid people like that back off to Colombia, because we have people here who used to be on benefits, curtains shut, 11 o'clock, they'll get a kick up the backside, they'll be lying on their fronts and learning how to do proper work for the red, white and blue food system that will beat the world.
You know, I was so embarrassed, so ashamed to go to a food bank. I couldn't tell nobody. I couldn't talk to anybody at all. Going to a food bank, it's like, you know, you should appreciate it. And I get to this place, and they give me some things that I don't even know how to cook. the more I questioned, the more people got upset with me because I didn't appreciate what I was getting. Can you imagine things that you've never cooked, that you don't even understand? It's got all these numbers that you don't know what it is, and you have to feed it to your children. And I was like, the more questions that you asked, and I was like, you know, you don't fit into that stereotype of what a food banker is. And actually, it could happen to anybody. And it's what do we do about it?
When we set up this system with beverage and all these chaps after the war, it was about making sure everybody had enough to eat. If people work really hard, as my cleaner does, as I've explained, then I'm sure eventually they will have enough to have the nice quinoa sprouted edamame salads. But until then, they're going to have carnation milk and work a bit harder.
You see, my daughter, Chili, who goes by the name of Linda, she's very confused about her identity. She's almost trying to fit into this culture that she doesn't understand. You know, every time she doesn't want to relate to the knowledge that I am trying to teach her. She's not valuing in my knowledge at all.
Mom, you won't believe this. You won't believe this. I've got a wicked attack. Your food is banging.
What are you celebrating?
Your food is happening, Mom. It's the thing. It's the thing. You don't understand, Mom. Ask me.
Explain.
Box park. Box park.
You eat in a box?
No, Mom. Shoreditch. It's got a box park. West Croydon's got a box park. Plantain is the thing to eat. Chicken little boxes, Mom. It is wicked. My friends, they all want to go. They all want to eat, Mom. They all want to eat. It's the place to be. We go in it. £15.
Come on.
I need £15.
This is fresh. This is the same fresh food I'm cooking at home for years.
Mom, £15. Come on.
£15 to eat plantain.
But
You come home. You come home and eat.
Well, we see the example of how a great knowledge economy, with all the ingenuity we see with our friends, I don't know why they call them Shoreditch twats, they have invented this amazing economy around innovation in food. And eventually that tide will have risen high enough so we can all be eating plantain with sprinkles of chia seeds and a light dusting of the brown stuff that my wife knows what it is, but it just looks very trendy.
So I managed to come down to London and I go to see my friends who also are Colombian to stay there, you know. And they were all talking very strangely to me about energies and the cosmos and all of these things, and I couldn't really understand. And when I walked through the doors, they were all like, I'm doing all these kind of things that really, I don't know what they are. Then I say, but what's going on with you? And they say, brother, you must find your center. The world, poverty and hunger, we will have a solution if everyone went vegan and vegetarian.
My fifth daughter, Persephone, has a Pilates studio. I think there's some relation there. But what we have done is realise that all the centres of food policy and centres for agroecology, they haven't really given us any reports on this faith and like foreign stuff, like people in our country who look different to us. So I've decided we will have our Economic and Social Research Council have a competition for global, diverse, red, white and blue Brexit, indigenous, not immigrant food cultures. Well, Jose, is that Jose? I'll just call you John. It's great. So, well, it's great we got that grant from, well, it wasn't the ESRC in the end, because they actually weren't as good on diversity as we hoped. I think an edict from Gove or something. But we went to the Glaxo Sunny Delight Welcome Happy Magic Bullets Foundation, and they gave us the money. So we are going to do that research Dr. Tim Watkins, by the way, sorry. And I was so pleased to grab some time with you to brief you on this research before we go out into the field. Had to get myself away from the PVC NVC, the Pro-Vice Chancellor for New Venture Capital. Yes. So I think we need to get out and do that research. They want quick results. They want it turned around in a week. So let's go out and find some of these diverse people and get the data and the lived experience that we so need to understand their life worlds.
Shall we try the Kansas state?
Oh, it's getting a bit far. Other people of colour in the Kansas state?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Right. Okay. Oh, thank you. Are you sure there's anybody there? I'll see you last time. Anybody home?
Hiya.
We'd like to get your, we've done sort of survey research. Yeah, we like your lived experience of food. Your lived experience of food. If you were to have a vision for the future of food policy, would it be bottom up? Would it be top down? Or would it be an 8 o'clock cross with a banana? Have you got all measurements there, John?
Almost there, almost.
Okay. So I think you'll find that we'll put your photo on the website, be nice and diverse, and I think the next time we'll have got a proper ESRC grant and we'll be in.
Well done.
Okay, let's go. Lovely, madam.
So, I was walking down London, a bit disheartened, and I came across this community center. And I found this young lady that was kind of struggling with her identity. This mama that was really angry because the children didn't want to eat her food. And this woman, a food bank user. And so we talked for a bit.
I think we should do something about it. Seriously.
I think so, because if we don't do something about it ourselves, no one is going to do it for us. You know, I've been to all these things, and these people who are doing policy only talk to themselves.
We need a council state, guys. There's a massive. Have you not seen the big hole, guys? It's a massive. I know all my friends will be down to come and they want to know about food. They know. But we don't know nothing. We need to do something.
But you know, it's very important to come together and share each other's knowledge, and listen and understand each other, and then do something about it.
But we all have so many skills. We can research ourselves and tell them this is what it is, this is what we experience ourselves. Should we go do it?
I agree, we should go and knock on everyone's doors, bring them to the meeting, ask them what they want, what they believe, what their dreams are. You know, that's how we should do it, from the bottom up.
And we can do it any way that we want, so people can actually understand it. We can do it through music, we can do it through dance, we can write it.
We can cook it.
We can cook it.
And you know what? I'm being invited to this symposium about food policy. Maybe we should go and talk to them over there.
What?
Yeah.
What do you mean that?
I don't really know what it means, symposium, but anyway, it sounds quite interesting. So shall we go and try it out?
Yeah, we should try it.
Are you with us?
Well, I think we might have got right to the end of our slot there, but just to say that performance came out of about 6 months of conversations that happened in, what was it, Westy, northwest London? North Wheezy, indeed, and in Coventry, in the northeast of England, and just the beginnings of work in Hull, where Hull Solidarity is based. So I think we'll be around all afternoon. There's further contributions. So I think unless there's anything burning, we'll let the symposium continue.
Thank you very much. That was deliberately intended to provoke. Quite deliberately. Thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it. Sometimes we need to ask hard questions of ourselves, and we need to think about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And sometimes we need to be brought back to that kind of reality. And that said, I would argue that everyone should have a voice. and that we don't want to be divided and them and us about it. Everybody here has the right to speak, and everybody on the street has the right to speak. And it's collecting those voices which we can do better at doing. And there were some comments this morning about how everybody needs to be involved. And that's really the spirit of this afternoon, about bringing in voices from all of us here, all of us outside this room, and all of those who are affected by food systems problems. And so with that in mind, we asked some of you to put together your thoughts on taking food policy forward into the future from the perspective of who it should involve and how. How can we do food policy better by connecting better with people? We heard this morning about connecting through short circuits, better connections between producers and consumers. We heard about the need to connect individual lives with systemic solutions. We heard about the need to connect through alliances as a community. So now we're going to hear from 14 people who occupy different places in the food system and have different roles. You will hear there is a bias towards the people who have been educated in some way or are present in some way at the Centre for Food Policy, but it's not exclusively those people. And as you will see, the people who do our master's programme and do our PhDs programme and so on are from themselves very diverse backgrounds. So the questions that I have asked these speakers to talk on for 2 or 3 minutes, and please do stick to that 2 to 3 minutes, is how you would like to see food policy being done differently in the 21st century. It was nice to have a parody of that question just now. Who should it involve, and how should it involve them? And these are important questions. We will also, after this, very briefly go over the answers that you sent back to the survey before this symposium. So without further ado, we'll start. And I would like to call on Daphne Page, please, to start the proceedings. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Daphne. I grew up on a farm in rural Quebec in Canada, and a few steps in between happened, and I'm now doing my PhD at the Centre for Food Policy. And my research is on how cities in the UK are developing local food policies with sustainability as a central framework. What I've found in my research is just that there are so many different conceptions of what sustainability is, and every locality has different sort of issues and have to develop bespoke strategies, policies, action plans to try to address these. So I think the way that food policy should be done as we go into the future is to really consider those local issues and addressing them in tailored ways. Having citizen involvement is hugely important. An issue that I've found is that so many people who are involved with developing local food policies, citizens themselves, might not necessarily branch out to everyone in the community for a diverse range of people and perspectives. So the people who are the local experts and the champions for local food have specialist knowledge. And somehow that gets lost a little bit when communicating beyond their select groups. Additionally with the council as well, since they might not be specialists themselves. So reaching out to the community is a very, very important part of developing local food policies to address issues, systemic issues that filter down to the local level. And so bringing people in, creating environments where you can have celebration days for food in your community to really bring people out, to make a family day of it, and then to try to bring them into the conversation, I think would be really important. One of my students, I'm very, very glad to introduce Cairo Charles. He's going to tell us a little bit about his experience with food growing up in London.
Hi everyone, my name's Cairo. So I'm from a town called West Eden in the Borough of Eden from West London. So the food landscape, I'd say, was fairly diverse. There was a range of cafes, takeaways, corner shops, etc. Growing up in West Eden, when I used to consume a lot of junk, I used to usually have meals from like supermarkets, so I'd have like the McCain's chips packets, I'd have like the odd crisps here and there. I'd say growing older now, I'm 18 now, from the age of probably about 14, I'd say I became more aware of my sort of health and sort of changed my eating habits, so I would exercise a lot more as well at the same time. My family background is Caribbean, so the meals are generally healthy, and I usually just when I come to university, I usually bring food from home rather than eating out. I'd only probably eat out on like certain occasions, if it's like a friend's birthday or something like with my family. In terms of food policy, I feel like a good approach would be for it to be like a sort of local-based one where it's suited to specific boroughs rather than a sort of one-size-fits-all approach. The people involved should be obviously the local authorities, and if they could work with sort of community-based organizations where you could get sort of thoughts and ideas from the public, like individuals themselves, to see how food policy can progress in the near future. The media, because obviously the media has become like increasingly influential, so if there's any sort of way you could advertise campaigns to sort of raise awareness and try and find more like-minded people like yourselves to come together and, you know, bring in more ideas. And then another one was schools. I'd say dedicating more time for students to understand the impact food can have on our lifestyles and our health. And yeah, that's what I have to say.
Okay, now call on Jack Fisher.
Hi everyone, my name is Jack. I'm here as the coordinator for Europe and Africa for a global social startup called NCD Free. That's free as in F-R-E-E. We're basically an advocacy and communications group which tries to spread the word of non-communicable diseases around the world, not only to the health fanatics like ourselves in this room, but also to the non-health people, and try to get a range of perspectives and solutions to some of our big global health issues. And we know, for example, if we talk about nutrition, that nutrition is a particularly important aspect of preventing ill health. And we also use food as a way of engagement, because we know that food is something which binds us all together, and as is mentioned before, it's something which is fundamental in an everyday life. So I've kind of prepared 3 little statements regarding to food policy. So we would like to see food policies which are inclusive and take into consideration multiple views and multiple contexts, which address food security and sustainability. We know that the nutrition landscape is forever changing, and there's no one silver bullet, and therefore we have to see food policies which are malleable in different contexts around the world. We would like to see food policies effectively translated to a range of actors in the global health space, which include policymakers, civil society, and governments across income settings to enhance a collective and continuing effort. It's okay coming up with these great policies, but if they're not effectively translated to those who can make change, then it really is pointless. And finally, we'd like to see food policies consistently assessed in a timely and frequent manner to continue and to ultimately improve continual development and improvement. As we said, this is not something which we can have a 10-year plan, because ultimately those 10 years are missed opportunities. We have to consistently assess and evaluate and ultimately improve. And who it should involve? Again, it should be involving a range of young professionals and students from a range of backgrounds to try and provide those different solutions to ultimately our biggest global health challenges. And how we can do that is by using different forms of engagement, like social media, like multimedia, like short films, and global social campaigns. Ultimately, young professionals and students, and many of us today use devices which are in our pockets to receive information and engage in everyday topics. And if we can spread that to food policies, then that's one step forward. Thank you.
I'll ask Annie Connolly, please.
Hi, my name's Annie Connolly. I'm a PhD student, a non-standard apparently, which means kind of older and with kids. PhD student at the University of Leeds, but I'd call myself kind of a campaigner, really, that just happens to be doing a PhD. So my answers to Corinne's question, when Corinne sent the questions through, how would you like to see food policy being done differently? And I was thinking about this, and I thought what we need to get people who are responsible for developing food policy to do is recognise the power of food. So it's so much more than fuel, and it can be used to reduce inequality. So I want food policy makers to always look at the big picture. So yes, health and well-being, and yes, environment, but always social justice. And so, you know, we all know that food policy making is often siloed, and I would argue this has to change, and change quickly. So in terms of who it should involve, I think we need to hear. I thought your performance was fantastic, guys, by the way, and it was really funny because it really challenged me, because I'm going to talk about lived experiences and things. And actually, I'm just going off thing here, but as a new researcher that's just got involved in universities and research, I'm always talking about kind of taking myself in, and researchers telling other people's stories. And actually what we need to do is work with people so that they're telling their own stories, and I think that was what came across from your performance. So, but we need to make sure, I would say, that people who are living in poverty in particular, we need to make sure that their voices are being heard, because they're often marginalised. And the rich can circumvent the food system that we're all battling against, but people who live in poverty have fewer restricted choices. And I would also put a shout out for making sure that we hear the voices of children, because they do have very different experiences to adults. Oh, sorry, I've got to tell you that. My PhD is in looking at the lived experiences of children and food insecurity, and also the impact of welfare reform on household food insecurity. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm working with kids and hearing their stories at the moment. So yeah, they have a very different experiences to that of adults, and we often don't let them speak for themselves. And so in terms of how we can involve people, as researchers, which a lot of us are, I think we can use qualitative work, and I would argue that this is where we should start. We should start with people's stories and try and understand through whatever method people's lived experiences, particularly children. But I would also put a shout out for longitudinal studies where you are working with people over an extended period of time, so you're not just getting a snapshot of people's experiences. And I think this is particularly important in terms of food poverty, and I was thinking of an example on the train up. So if I went and talked to a mum today about what's happening in her household today, I'd get a very different picture to next week when the school holidays are, when the kids her kids might not have access to free school meals, and she's trying to afford to pay for a Christmas dinner. So, and those kind of changes, I think we need to map out as researchers the changes to people's lives over an extended period of time, and I think we get a much more accurate picture of what's happening for people. And I'd like to give an example of another creative project. So I think we talk about participatory action research at the moment in the universities. I don't really know what that means, but in terms of working with people, a really great example from Leeds is a group of benefit claimants. The project's called Dole Animators, and you should look it up. And they work together with a filmmaker and someone from Leeds Uni to create an animated documentary. And they were trying to express their realities of the impact of the government's recent welfare reforms. So I think my general message is talk to people, don't represent their voices, but provide a space for people to give, to use their own voices, particularly people living in poverty and particularly children.
Thank you. Now, Jason O'Rourke.
My name's Jason O'Rourke. I don't know where it puts me on the spectrum, because I'm doing a doctorate and I've got teenage children, and I'm a head teacher as well. So I'm a head teacher of a primary school. And we do a lot with food education. To follow up on Tim's point that he made, you were very excited when food policy came into the lexicon. If food education or food literacy came to Lexicon, I think that would be a really exciting place, because that means it's happening with children in schools. You probably read, if you're interested in this, childhood obesity plan that came out in the summer, a bit of a kind of wet blanket, really. But what they've done with it is actually put the onus on schools. If you read it carefully, they put a lot of things on schools. But the sense now is that the burden is on us to try and sort this out, the childhood obesity and the food education. It says schools are a vital part of our plan and have opportunity to support healthier eating, physical activity, and to shape healthy habits. And we do. We are a powerful institution to change children's or individuals' life choices. Currently, 1 in 5 reception children enter school overweight or obese, and then it goes up to a third of 10 to 11-year-olds leave primary school overweight or obese. Now, if I had that as a head teacher with my literacy figures or my maths figures, I'd be worried about my job. We need a programme introduced into schools, into policy, an action plan, not a policy, put it into there, put it into the inspection framework, put it into Ofsted inspectors' minds as they come into school to measure. We've got the measures of it, put it in there, and it will happen. Head teachers always look at what Ofsted say, okay? So when they're coming in, they're thinking, what are they going to measure? If we can put that in the inspection plan or the common inspection framework, then it will actually happen. In our school, children grow a lot. They have vegetable beds, we have an orchard, we have beehives, we have pizza ovens, we have our own kitchen. Children are naturally curious. So a reception child or a nursery child, if they're planting a seed into a vegetable bed and then they're weeding that seed and they're nurturing it and they're looking after it and then they're harvesting it, and of course they want to eat it. They want to taste that. So these children here want that experience. Now, if we as schools can give them that experience, they're going to lap it up. And then they change perceptions of families as well. Because when we're giving recipes to children, they're making things, you then pass that on to their parents. Those parents are going to have to be quite hard-hearted to say, well, we won't do that at home, because our child knows how to do it, because they're learning it in schools. So if we can get that into the curriculum, that is going to have a major impact. It's also an element, I've got quite a lot of teachers in our school in their 20s and 30s, and it's training up those teachers, because they've lost those cooking skills as well. Okay, they come in and they don't have the skills to be able to cook. So it's that training up of those teachers and the skills put in at primary age and at secondary age, not adding it on as a DT add-on, is where it is at the moment, it's cooking skills, but adding it on as a lesson that they must do all the way through, not make a choice at one point of saying I'm going to drop that lesson, get those skills in it, because they are skills for life. There needs to be awareness of the issues that are affecting children in our school today, an impact on the teaching and learning that can affect the life expectancies of these children. I haven't found one child yet that is going to have a reduced lifespan because they don't know frontal adverbials or they don't know how to multiply fractions. But if they don't know how to cook, they don't know how to nourish themselves for the rest of their lives, they're going to get those non-communicable diseases. We've got more children now, under the age of 16, getting diabetes or other health-related illnesses than we've ever had. Okay? And this is the process that we need to kind of address and not focus in on those two areas of literacy and numeracy. They are important, but they're not going to have an effect on the children's health. And my doctorate is in school leadership and food education. All head teachers have control issues. We control a lot of what goes on in the school. If head teachers are behind this, it will happen in their schools. And the way you go into that is you get it into teacher training colleges and you train the students who are going to be the next teachers and they're going to be the next head teachers. If they get it, then it will happen in there. And make it an action plan. Do not make it a policy. Put it in there and it will happen.
Okay, Rebecca Wells. Rebecca Wells.
Hello everybody, I'm Rebecca Wells. I'm also a non-standard PhD student here at the Centre for Food Policy, so perhaps non-standard is a bit more standard than we thought. But I'm also an education coordinator for a project called IFSTAL, which is an acronym, very long title, the Innovative Food Systems Teaching and Learning Project, which is a consortium of different institutions. And what I want to talk about is a little bit about how doing food policy, how we teach food policy, and how we work on food policy as academic institutions. What we're trying to do at IFSTAL is to work with lots of different disciplines who are all looking at food. So postgraduate students from food policy here at City, from geography and other disciplines at Oxford, veterinary students at the Royal Veterinary College, nutritionists from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, anthropologists from SOAS, and a lot of others besides. And we really feel, and I feel that it's important for us to work in an interdisciplinary way to get lots of different perspectives together. And I know that food policy is very often, how we do it at City is very often interdisciplinary. I'm sure there's lots and lots of different and a rich range of disciplines here today. But I think one of the things that we try and do with IFSTAL, and one of the things I think we need to do more often, is to try and look at those different perspectives. And sometimes we feel like we're only talking to ourselves, as was made clear. And that's a thing that we need to try and avoid, to try and talk to lots of different people with lots of different perspectives. And lots of different disciplinary backgrounds. So, for example, somebody mentioned earlier antimicrobial resistance, which is something that we've talked about as in projects and in some of our away days and our summer school as a really sort of intractable, really difficult problem to grapple with. And I think that unless we look at this from lots of disciplinary perspectives, from lots of different people's angles and from their different viewpoints, then we're not going to be able to solve some of these major challenges. So I'm putting forward an argument for interdisciplinary working and for teaching and for us all to work together a bit more as academics and as students. Thank you.
Okay, Jill Williams.
Hello, my name is Joel Williams. I'm also a part-time MSc Food Policy student here. And in my other part-time, I work in education and advisory. And I work with farmers and growers, educating particularly on soil health, and mainly with conventional farmers who are in that transition and looking to, take steps towards the middle, become more sustainable. And I see in this fraction of the farming world that there is that great interest in cover crops and these more agroecological techniques. There's a real thirst, even amongst the conventional farmers, for this information. And so for me, I feel that food policy could benefit from a greater integration of farmers up into the rest of the food system. I think we can then work on solutions to the environmental problems, the public health problems, if farmers better understood what was going on up there and if we could better integrate them. I look from out in the industry, there's a great trend in farmer-led research at the moment where researchers, farmers and extension officers come together, and together through those conversations they set the research agenda. And perhaps there's a lesson learned for us there in the world of food policy, ensuring that farmers and and policymakers come together to kind of work together to form these solutions. So I also see that farmers really enjoy online forums and having discussions on forums. They share growing tips, information about tractors, all of these kinds of things. They're very active in the forum world. And so, of course, the tricky part, how do we engage? But we're going to need multiple tools, but perhaps an online forum, stimulate some discussion around how we can do policy together and see what emerges and feed that back in and carry on the two-way dialogue there. Thank you.
Okay, Vincent Gainey.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to try and sound not at all like our government colleague here, because I work for the Department of International Development, and I'm not going to try and sound like the archetypal civil servant if I can possibly help it. But thanks for that characterization. I'm a livelihoods and agriculture advisor who works with the Department for International Development, actually up in East Kilbride in Scotland. I work for the agricultural policy team, so we're very much at the forefront of deciding on agriculture and food policy for the 21st century for developing low-income countries. And I've listened to a lot of discussions here around UK domestic policy, and I've tried to place that with how we look at it in the international arena. I've worked for 35 years, I think, now in international development in food and agriculture in the South Pacific, in Africa, in Eastern Europe. So I've got a little bit of background, sort of, say, I kind of maybe know what I'm talking about. Where we are going at the moment, in terms of government policy, it's very much focused around economic development and trade. As you'll have seen, we've got a new Department for International Trade. We're linking very much into that. So it's talking very much now about how we can get farmers to work as businessmen, small farmers, you know, guys in Africa with 1.5 hectares of land, how we can get them more attuned to business production and how you can achieve food and income security by making agriculture a more commercially viable and productive sector. And that's really important, and I think for sort of 500 million smallholder producers worldwide, getting them out of subsistence agriculture and getting them becoming more economically productive will be a way to achieve food and income security. My concern is, though, that an awful lot of people are getting left behind, and in the global goals, which have been set till 2030, we talk about leaving no one behind. We talk about being inclusive. We had a lot of discussion today about being inclusive. Yet, there are very, very many farmers who are struggling in conflict-ridden countries, challenged by climate change, challenged by political marginalization, by lack of infrastructure, by lack of education, who are actually being left behind. And I think one of the big issues that we've got to tackle for the 21st century is how to bring them in, how to be more inclusive, not just to deal with the low-hanging fruit of the farmers who can actually step up into higher productive agriculture. And that's part of my challenge in my work, is looking at a more inclusive agricultural model that will achieve food security for those who are struggling as well as those who are able to achieve. And we look at all levels of exclusion. When women particularly are excluded, and we know that across the board, that women put in the hardest work in agriculture and yet get the fewest returns. But that sort of exclusion also extends. I've worked in many countries, including in northern Kenya and western Sudan, where small farmers and herders are not able to access the mainstream. They're not able there's no roads there, they've got no education, politically they're marginalized, and they're at the forefront of the cutting edge of climate change. It's affecting them the most. So those are the type of people we have to focus on. And we're estimating maybe 500 million to 1 billion people by mid-century will fall into that bracket of being excluded. So that's a big challenge. And who should do it? You know, who should be stepping up to this? Well, everybody, really. I mean, it's the role of us who are in the international development community to allocate the resources that are needed to start getting the wheels of government moving in development countries, to start getting the policy moving in the right direction towards better inclusion. But there's a huge role for the private sector as well, and getting the private sector recognizing that you need to start being inclusive of the whole society, not just those for whom you can reach easily next to the main roads, next to the capital cities. How can we bring those in through cooperatives, associations, farmers groups, etc.? So what do we need to do? I mean, we're looking at a policy enabling environment from governments that enables these type of interventions to happen. We're looking at a private sector that starts to realize that there's more opportunities amongst a very large global population to actually start bringing more people into supply and value chains, both local and global. We're also looking at the role of civil society, which represents very poor people, very different for poor people, as we've seen, to be able to sort of step up themselves and be given voice. So the role of civil society is really important. So I think we're looking at a unified work across all of these players to sort of bring together a food policy that is fit for purpose for maybe that 500 million or more people who are going to be left behind by mid-century. That's me.
Okay, now Angelina Sanderson-Bellamy.
Hi, I'm a researcher. I consider myself an ecologist. I've worked in Costa Rica for the last 15 years with banana and coffee producers. I really worked looking at how governance structures drive management, production practices, and in turn how those influence the delivery of ecosystem services on the farm. And I've worked with organic producers, I've worked with Rainforest Alliance certified producers and conventional producers. And a lot of the themes that have come up today really come into the work that I work with, namely, you just spoke about bringing in these small-scale producers into the global supply chain. And what I find from the perspective, because working with producers and working with laborers in these production systems, is this increasing drive that was mentioned earlier about this price squeeze between the pressures to produce higher quality goods and the cost of inputs in their systems, and a lot of producers expressing the sentiment that we're getting squeezed out, and I don't know where the future lies because I can't continue like this. There's a vulnerability there in the system, and so I think, you know, thinking about small-scale producers, thinking about laborers on these farms, what's really missing there is a living wage, and that you've got labels like fair trade trying to incorporate these concepts of increased wages for producers and laborers, and there's been a lot of criticisms there, as we saw in the skit a little bit earlier. And Rainforest Alliance, they've rolled out new certification standards. They're supposed to come into effect in July 2017, where they're incorporating the concept of a living wage. And I think, you know, there'll be some work to do creating an evidence base around that and monitoring and evaluating the successes and the shortfalls in those programs to feed back into the development of those policies. But these are niche labels, and the right to a living wage should be a universal concept, not something that we have to look to specialty labels to produce. And what we have, like what Terry mentioned earlier, is this concentration of wealth and power in the hands of retailers and buyers. And so producers, laborers, there's very little choice in the production system for them, very little leeway. And what you see is the concentration of wealth in the hands of CEOs and shareholders and people at the top garnering more wealth, while the people at the bottom are struggling to make a living wage. And so I think what we really need is a distribution to redistribute that power and that wealth through these different supply chains by shortening the supply chains and putting people in closer touch with where their food actually comes from and who it is that's responsible for growing that food that we eat. And I think it touches on the comment that was made earlier as well about a change in cultural perceptions, that we need to expect that laborers would receive a living wage for the work that they do. And so there needs to be implementation and enforcement of that living wage for all producers and for all laborers.
Thank you. Anna Taylor.
Very much. Hi everybody, I'm Anna. I work for the Food Foundation. For those of you that don't know us, we're an independent think tank working on food policy here in the UK. And Corinna wanted me to talk a little bit about an initiative which we're doing with WWF, Nourish Scotland and Food Cardiff, which is all about trying to tackle supply-side barriers to veg consumption in the UK. And it's all about trying to get more voices into food policy thinking, which is how we're kind of framing the project. So in terms of what we need to do differently, I think it's really about what we're trying to do more of, which is build leadership around food policy thinking. And we're thinking that to do that, we really need to start to build some strong common narratives around the challenge that we face. And so that's what we're trying to do at the moment, and we're trying to rally people right the way across the supply chain of veg, right from producers, small and large, through to retailers and fast food, to think about what role everybody has in helping to get everyone to eat an extra portion of veg a day, so making it easier for everyone to eat veg, basically. And it's interesting. I mean, what we're trying to do is bring together those businesses and the public sector, local and central, and civil society and academia, together to kind of co-develop solutions and identify how the bottlenecks along the supply chain can be overcome. And of course, through the process, you inevitably, well, you surface things which you could never have found out if however much kind of Googling and reading you'd done about how the supply chain works. But of course, also you surface kind of big clashes of values, because given that different people obviously have different incentives and values within the supply chain. So things like, you know, should vegetables be branded or not? Are supermarket contracts a good thing or not? Are subsidies for horticulture a good thing or not? Are prices a real barrier or not? Everybody's got a different view on those things. But what we're finding, in terms of how you should do this, what we started off by doing was taking 20 people to Birmingham, 20 people working in all different bits of the supply chain, private and public sector. And we immersed ourselves for a day in the situation in Birmingham. So we went to met the school food provider, we went to the wholesale market, we visited a really big farm, we visited a tiny market garden. We talked to people working in research, and one of the things we did was we took up the group and we put them outside a secondary school in one of the more deprived parts of Birmingham and gave them £2.50 each and said, go and get some lunch and try and get as much veg in it as you possibly can. And it was very interesting how the process of doing that helped people really to lift out of their own specific set of corporate interests, their bit of the supply chain that they understand, and think about a challenge in a more common kind of collective way. And it helped to build trust amongst the group, and also helped to lift people out of their silos and start to think about the problem together. So I think there's a role for that. Clearly, I mean, I was thinking, I used to be a civil servant before this, and obviously when you consult on policy as a civil servant, it's quite formulaic, and you have people in the room, and the tone of the conversation is very much about, here's a problem, it's your job to solve it, government. And we absolutely need more government leadership on food policy. I totally believe that, but I also think that spaces outside of that government setting can sometimes be a bit more creative and a bit more innovative and a bit more can-do in their nature. So we're hoping it will be can-do ultimately.
Clara Widdowson.
Hello, I'm Clara Widdowson, and I am the National Growth Manager for Community Shop, and I also just finished about 5 days ago my MSc at City and Food Policy. I'm just about sobering up now. So the reason I think that Corinne asked me to talk was because I come from the alternative retail perspective. Community Shop is a model that takes surplus food from the UK supply chain into deprived communities and sells it low cost to people on a low income and reinvests all that profit back into community development. Community development is a little bit of a buzzword, so what I mean by that is we recognise that we're sailing at the moment for deprived communities in very rocky waters. We acknowledge that if we bring that boat, that community, that boat together, and we sail it together, and we share skills, and we sail it in the same direction, we have a better chance of people not drowning than if we don't do that. For me, the model is a short-term solution to food poverty. It's not a long-term solution to food poverty. I take the approach that we need both a downstream and an upstream approach to food poverty. And even though we need to work very hard on change across the food system, I don't want to see victims of food poverty because of that, because of the time it takes to change policy and create new frameworks. And so I see this as a short-term solution, whilst us as policymakers sitting in this room can respond to the bigger questions. We talked a lot, I'm hearing a lot today, people talking about poor people having a voice and having a platform. It's very hard to do that when you're hungry. It's very hard to have a voice. It's very hard to be energized. It's very hard to get angry. When I'm hungry, I tend to get sleepy and quite uninvolved in things. And so by supporting communities with food, we hope that we're actually fueling them more than anything. So I was asked to talk a little bit about retail and what part retail should play. When I was mulling this over in my mind, I was thinking about the phrase alternative retail and how kind of sinister that is actually. That sends shivers down my spine because it creates a sense that we've actually allowed market dominance in this area more than we would allow in any other area. You know, if we look at the comparison with food hospitality, we don't talk about alternative food hospitality. It's not McDonald's, KFC, and Taco Bell, or something small and niche over here. So for me, the fact that we have to talk about alternative food retail really reflects the control and power that the multiples have over our retail and over our supply chain as a result, which is, you know, rather scary. I think the multiples do sense consumer disillusion. I see that in a lot of ways, not least Asda put out a report a couple of years ago about how they're trying to turn every supermarket, every Asda into community hub and have homework groups and sports groups, and they recognise that consumers are really disillusioned with what they're currently offering. I heard, you know, today Tim was saying that government need to set the framework for changing consumption patterns, and companies cannot do that. And Kath echoed that and said, what if we did retail in a way that farmers actually mattered? And I think that for me is key in actually taking the power away from multiples and making it so that retail is no longer dominated by their voice. So yes, retail should be at the table for policy making, absolutely. But the current multiples we have formed the retail sector to suit themselves and to do retail in a way that benefits them commercially, but actually doesn't benefit the consumer in any way. And so Terry really hit the nail on the head by saying we need to build diverse alliances of consumers and producers and circumnavigate commercially driven organizations in the middle. And then in terms of, on top of that, we need to look at retail as integrating with health, with environment, with urban planning, with community development, and with education as well. Thank you.
Stephanie Lim. Stephanie.
I feel like a pendulum.
This is what happens in the MSc food policy. You're on a treadmill.
PhD, Tim.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I used to work in advertising for about 4 years, so don't hate me for that. Some of the clients I've worked for are actually food manufacturers and food service companies, but I left advertising because I found myself disagreeing with a lot of things that we were doing, and personally I was having sort of a moral conflict. That's why I joined the food policy at City. I would like to see advertising done differently. If we actually take a step back, advertising is more than just selling sugary snacks to children on behalf of food manufacturers. It's actually about behavioral change. It's about motivating people to do something and to tell them to continue doing it, which I think echoes Jack Fisher's tones perfectly. So in future, advertising can be seen as a tool to promote healthier eating, but of course it's more than just education-based policy. But it's definitely one of the aspects that we should be looking into. The advertising industry is actually in a position where we inform food manufacturers what the consumer is thinking about, what they want, how to appeal to them. So in a way, we are sort of like researchers, of course not academic ones. We actually are influencing marketing decisions. And if we can use this data to push for more socially responsible messages within advertising, within the food industries, then I guess we are one step closer to promoting healthier eating. But of course, the advertising industry alone, we do not have power because we are after all on the payroll of the clients. So there's only so much we can push, and it's easy to give the client what they want, but which is most of the time repackaging a product and just selling it back to consumers. But to push for socially responsible messages is challenging because it's usually a message of moderate consumption. So that actually goes against their priority for profits. But it can be done. There's this alcohol company that is promoting moderate drinking. They just started the campaign just this year. Not going to name who. But food manufacturers often claim that they are just giving consumers what they want, so consumers tell them what they want. So consumers, NGOs, activists, everybody should just get involved, tell them, hey, I want genuinely healthier products. And food manufacturers now, obviously, I think they're aware as well that this same tactics of repackaging and rebranding doesn't work anymore. But they should reformulate, which I think a lot of UK companies are actually doing it right now, and invest in more R&D to provide genuinely healthy products. And it should be a genuine thing that they're looking forward, looking as a long-term campaign, a long-term strategy instead of a short-term campaign, which you guys call as a marketing gimmick. And it's actually quite successful, personally, I find. One of them has actually claimed to find a way to reduce sugar by 40%. And on the government side, there should be also a benchmark to actually tell the food industry what is actually healthy, and to actually pressurize them to follow these guidelines instead of it being self-regulatory. So we all need, all the different sectors for good, healthy eating policy. Thank you.
Claire Maris next.
Hi, and you might be pleased to hear I'm the last one, and I'm the penultimate one. It's great to hear so many voices, but so I'm Claire Maris. I'm a senior lecturer here at the Centre for Food Policy, and I was very pleased to join at the same time as Corinna nearly a year ago. I've taken over from Tim the leadership of the Masters that you've heard quite a bit about already today. You've heard from some of our students today. So it's a great honour and also quite exciting and a bit of a trepidation. The Master's been going on for more than 20 years. We've got fantastic alumni doing fantastic work all over the world. So we really want to continue doing that. And it's a great pleasure to be involved with these fantastic students. I started off as a biologist a long, long time ago. With quite an idealistic biologist in the sort of 70s, 80s, thinking that what we needed was better science and technology so that we could produce more food to feed poor people in those countries where apparently they couldn't grow enough food for themselves. I believed it, that's where I came from, that's what the discourse was. We were seeing starving Ethiopian children on the television at the time, so I thought I can use my skills as a scientist to do that. By the time I spent 5 years in a lab in Thatcherite years, I'd sort of begun to become more sceptical about what science and technology in this country, including in the public sector, was doing. And I converted to social sciences, and I've been working as a social scientist, as a sociologist of science, looking at the way in which governments and other actors see the role of science and technology in food and agriculture. So the way in which I would want to see food policy done differently in the future is in 3 ways. 2 that we've heard a lot on today already: more integrative, so more taking into account the health and the environmental dimensions together, as well as the social and economic and cultural dimensions. More systemic, focus on the whole system, not just looking at particular compartments at a time. And more participative. And I want to focus on this last one because this is where a lot of my work is focused on. So we've heard a lot about being more inclusive, having more people. I want more people with more different perspectives involved more deeply. But I think when we say that, and when we try and do more inclusive food policy, we need to think about why it is we want these people involved. And of course, we have to also think very hard about how, but why do we want it? And for me, it's about opening up the process whereby we define what the problems are. So as I say, is it just about producing more food, or is it about other things as well, or other things being more important? But when we have more people involved, that often, from my experience, helps to sort of reframe the problem that we think is at stake, and often makes it more complex. And my experience, I've had a lot of, over the last 20 years, a lot of experience through my work of either organising or watching and analysing initiatives which have tried to involve citizens or consumers or whatever you want to call them, people in decision-making about genetically modified crops and foods. And most of those have been organised by governments, or they've been organised by scientific institutions. And even when the policymakers have been really quite genuinely open, wanting to do good and wanting in their own minds to include people's voices, fairly systematically or typically, the process has been limited by the way in which what they thought the problem was. And what they thought the problem was, fundamentally, was that people didn't understand that genetically modified crops are safe, and that they're the solution to producing more food, and that producing more food is clearly the problem that we have at stake. And that if you start thinking that we want to include people in order for them to understand better, or perhaps they could just say yes or no to particular GM crops, or they could tell us something about how they wanted it labeled, or whether they wanted it labeled or not. That limits what you're asking people to be involved in. You're not asking them to be involved in how do we shape the whole food system, or what kind of role might GM crops have in feeding the world, or compared to alternatives. So for me, that's the fundamental thing, is why we're involving people.
Thank you, and to our last speaker, no need to move, Deirdre Woods.
Hello, everyone. I prefer to be called Dee, and most people know me as Dee. I think I'm the only one here who is not an academic. I'm a volunteer. I'm a cook, a community food educator. I run a community food project and food growing project in Northwest London. I'm also this year's BBC Cook of the Year and London Slow Food Ambassador. And I think most people are aware of the benefits of community food growing and community food projects, you know, in terms of meeting health outcomes, you know, reducing sort of food poverty, social cohesion, reducing isolation, you know, making sure there's access to good food. And by good food, I mean nutritious food, fresh food. But like a lot of other things, community is ignored. The voices of ordinary people are ignored. And, you know, for me, as a poor woman, as a black woman, as a disabled woman, and as a single mother, I would like my voice to be heard. Right? No one has to speak for me. I am empowered. I have my voice, and I demand to be heard. And I think future food policy needs to take on board the experiences, the knowledge, and voices of ordinary people, and not focus so much on the quantitative. Yeah, forget those figures and fiscal values and all whatever, right? Listen to ordinary people, right? We have a lot to offer. How are we going to do that? Well, it's not about, you know, you have to come to us. You have to speak to us. We need to build those bridges. You need to include everyone. Children, marginalized people, homeless people, you name it. We need to build those bridges. Food producers, government officials, we need to talk. How are we going to do that? We need to find mechanisms and ways of doing that. People's forums, you know, use different formats, multimedia, you know, film, as someone said, you know, participatory film, all these various things, because not everyone is literate. Not everyone could understand jargon. We need plain English policies as well. And to give you an example, right, of the power of ordinary people, right, and putting people at the center of policy, this is a document that took over 18 months to produce, and it is the voice of ordinary people in the community food sector, right? And we were supported by academics, and it was various organizations and sort of on-ground community food groups who got together to do these policy proposals. And I did a lot of writing, and believe me, before this, I don't have a clue how to write a policy, but it just shows you what can be done. Thank you.
Thank you to all of those speakers. I hope you can join with me to appreciate the diversity of the people that we have in the room, that the people were selected from the people who had already signed up to the symposium, and wonderful to have that diversity. I certainly learned a lot. Thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to